We've got about 35 minutes until we get the new Vanguard alert. Let me take a look at this here video y'all wanted me to look at. Chat, is it this one right here? The 9 or the rules of the flower game? Say what? That's a trippy title right there.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Lore Nephew Dankke theory video. This is, I think, my best theory yet, and I'm super excited to present it to you guys. I want to start off by giving a personal thanks to Bife for the interview he conducted with Allison that he just posted on his channel last night. Because if it wasn't for the amazing questions that Bife asked Allison and the incredible insight that Allison gave in regards to the Destiny universe and the story of the Fate Saga, this theory would not exist. It is thanks to that interview that I had this eureka moment that led to the creation of this theory. And so the theory I'm presenting to you guys today is that I believe the 9 are the original rules of the flower game made manifest within the universe. This all comes from a question Bife asked Allison about eclipse energy. And in response, Allison said that the 9 are the rules. They are what allow the capacity for paracausality to function in the first place. And because of that status they have as the rules, they have this ability to like turn up or down the capacity for paracausality to function. And Eclipse is this energy the 9 can use to basically turn paracausality all the way down. And so the question that kind of follows is, what rules do the 9 represent, right? Because paracausality allows you to subvert most of the laws of the universe. It allows you to subvert the laws of physics and any form of conventional means possible. So if the 9 are rules that can subvert paracausality, they've got to be some pretty special rules. And as I did some digging, it all led me to unveiling and this theory that the 9 are the original rules of the flower game. And so in order for this theory to make sense, I'm going to need to do a brief breakdown of unveiling, because unveiling is where we learn the most about the flower game and its many different rules, as well as the dynamic between the Gardener and the Winnower. And
this right here, when we talk flower game shit, guys, this is when Destiny's story, like that, this is the kind of stuff that really amplifies Destiny's story.
How the universe was created in the first place. We're going to quickly break down the important parts of unveiling, so we all have a basic understanding, and then we're going to put it all together and explain this theory in the best way I can so that it makes sense for all of you guys. So first, let's ask the question of what is the Unveiling lore book? Unveiling was released in Shadowkeep, and it basically consists of a bunch of letters that the Winnower is sending to us in the hopes of convincing us that he is correct, convincing us to join his side. And within these letters is the creation story of the Destiny universe. It's the story of the co-creators of the Destiny universe in the garden before time. Before the universe was created, there was the Gardener and the Winnower. And in this garden before time, they played 2 games together. The first game was the game of possibilities, and the second game was the game of flowers. Now, the game of possibilities was this game of creation, co-creation, where both the Gardener and the Winnower would collaborate to create patterns, create new things, new possibilities within the garden. And they would take these creations that they made together, and they would use them in the game of flowers, which is ultimately a sort of game of competition, where they would put all these flowers, put all these patterns that they created, and they would see which pattern came out on top, which pattern, which flower was the best shape of itself and would win the game. And this game of flowers, or the flower game, only had 4 rules. And here's what Unveiling has to say about it. So this is from the 3rd chapter of Unveiling, titled The Flower Game. And it reads, "These are the rules of a game. Let it be played upon an infinite 2-dimensional grid of flowers. Rule 1. A living flower with less than 2 living neighbors is cut off. It dies. Rule 2. A living flower with 2 or 3 living neighbors is connected. It lives. Rule 3. A living flower with more than 3 living neighbors is starved and overcrowded. It dies. Rule 4. A dead flower with exactly 3 living neighbors is reborn. It springs back to life. The only play permitted in the game is the arrangement of the initial flowers.
What?
So those are the 4 rules.
I had not seen that. I didn't know about that. So only the initial layout is the only play? So what? You only get the one play? They're playing the flower game, but it's only one move? I just want to see what's under the Winnower's cloak. Good God.
Of the game of flowers. And as the Gardener and the Winnower continued to play this game together, the Gardener got more and more frustrated with the flower game. And that's because the same pattern, the same flower, would win the flower game over and over and over again. It would be the same outcome every single time.
Okay.
And the Gardener hated this. The Gardener became vexed by the flower game, as the text says. But in the face of this lack of complexity, because the game keeps ending the same, the Gardener proposes a new rule. And this is what the Gardener has to say in the chapter titled The First Knife Within Unveiling. A special new rule, something to... The Gardener threw up their hands in exasperation. I don't know, to reward those who make space for new complexity. A power that helps those who make strength from heterodoxy, and to steer the game away from gridlock. Something to ensure there's always someone building something new. It'll have to be separate from the rest of the rules, running in parallel so it can't be compromised. And we'll have to be very careful so it doesn't disrupt the whole game. All you will do, I said, and this is the Winnower talking, all you will do, I said, with rising panic and fury, is delay the dominant pattern that will overrun the others. It is inevitable. One final shape. No, it'll be different. Everything will be different. Everywhere you look. Everything will be the same. Your new rule will only make false cysts of horror full of things that should not exist, that cannot withstand existence, that will suffer and scream as their rich blisters fill with effluent and rot around them. And when they pop, they will blight the whole garden. Whatever exists because it must exist, and because it permits no other way of existence, has the absolute claim to existence. That is the only law. No, the Gardener said. I am the growth and preservation of complexity. I will make myself into a law in the game. And thus, we too became parts of the game. The laws of the game became gnomic and open to change by our influence, and I had only one purpose and one principle in the game, and I could not do anything but continue to enact that purpose, because it was all that I was and ever would be. So
is this like what's the analogy? Is this like someone who refuses to take off igneous hammer and conditional finality, you know, back in the day? You know what I mean? Like, obviously for the longest time, it would always be the number one meta choice. You know, it was the final shape, if you will, correct? But then the Gardener's like, no, we need to mix the sandbox up a little bit, all right? Buff pulse rifles.
Gardener proposes a new rule that would run in parallel with the old rules, the original 4 rules of the flower game. And so out of this proposal, both the Gardener and the Winnower became new rules within the flower game. And the rules that the Gardener and the Winnower became were the light and the darkness. This was the introduction of paracausality into the game of flowers. And one of the questions I asked myself as I was researching for this theory is, why didn't the Gardener propose to change the old rules, right? Why did the Gardener insist on creating new rules, becoming one of the new rules, when they could have just suggested, why don't we just change the old rules so that it can get my desired outcome? But the Gardener said, we have to make new rules in parallel with the old ones so not to compromise the entire game. And it is this line that is extremely integral to my theory of the 9 being the old rules of the flower game. And so I want this question to sit with you guys before we get into the more theory-based section is the Gardener and the Winnower, is the light in the darkness, is paracausality as this new rule subject under the influence of the old rules? And so for our last little bit of analysis, let's talk about the battle in the garden and the creation of the Destiny universe. So the Winnower, in the face of the Gardener proposing this new rule, became extremely angry. And in an attempt to stop the Gardener from creating the new rules, the Gardener and Winnower fought within the garden.
So again, pulse rifle buff about to be pushed through. Winnower says "F that." The meta has always been hand cannon, primarily hand cannon shotgun, and now they're fighting over it. Oh my god, dude, there's so many parallels.
In the vibrations, in the cosmic energy released from their clash, the Destiny universe was created and the game of possibility ends. But the flower game continues onward. And what happens is, in the wake of the creation of this universe from the clash of the Gardener and the Winnower, is that literally everything that was in the garden became real within the universe. The Gardener and the Winnower entered the universe as two new rules of the game, as the light and the darkness made manifest as the Traveler and the Veil. The flowers and the patterns made manifest as life within the universe. We have this example of the Vex. The Vex were originally the winning pattern. They were the pattern that kept winning the flower game over and over and over again.
Oh my god. So it's straight up rock, paper, scissors. I don't know. What's rock, paper, scissors fucking gun? In this case, rock, paper, scissors, Vex. So essentially the Clankers always won, and rightfully so. They got a lot going for them. Control time, infinitely spawn, a lot of other things. So yeah, I would change the new rules. I would add a new rule too.
Those guys became the Vex. We have the garden itself became manifest as the Black Garden. And we know this because the mountain, the stump that's in the center of the Black Garden that we go onto during the Garden of Salvation raid, that is the stump of the Tree of Silver Wings that was in the garden before time, that was cut down during the Gardener and the Winnower's fight. So everything that was in the garden became real in the universe. And if the two new rules of the flower game, being the light and the darkness, or the Gardener and the Winnower, the two new rules of paracausality became real and manifest, what about the old rules of the flower game, right? What about the 4 old rules? What happened to them when they got pushed into the new universe? So this is where I'm going to bridge into the theory section of the video and take all of the pieces established in my breakdown and put them together and make the theory make sense. Okay, so let's try and put all of the pieces together. Let's try and prove that the 9 really are the old rules of the flower game. Let's draw a bit of a diagram. So when the Gardener was establishing the new rules of the flower game, the Gardener wanted to make sure that the rules of paracausality, the 2 additions, ran in parallel with the original rules of the flower game, right? Like right here, the 4 original rules. And they wanted to make sure it didn't contradict or conflict with the original rules, so as not to compromise the integrity of the flower game. And the reason why that detail is extremely important is because it's suggesting this idea that the light and the darkness, the Gardener and the Winnower, are reliant on the foundational rules of the flower game. And ultimately, I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Because if the Gardener and the Winnower started changing all the rules, right? Like I said, why didn't the Gardener and the Winnower change the rules? If they did change the rules, and they started, cutting this law out and that rule out, and they started changing them and replacing them, the flower game would stop being the flower game. You would be changing and corrupting and removing the foundation of what makes the flower game the flower game. I want to use chess as a bit of an example here. Chess is a game with a lot of different rules. And I'm definitely not a chess expert, so if I get any of the terminology wrong, please forgive me. I'm just using this as an analogy. So chess has a lot of rules that are foundational to the idea of, chess, right? Certain things like, the bishop can move diagonally, the queen can basically move anywhere in any direction it wants to, as many spaces, stuff like that, right? The rook can go straight in either direction, stuff like that, right? These are foundational ideas to chess. If I wanted to add some ideas, add some rules to chess, I could add the rule, for example, that, you can only move each piece by 1 square, right? 1 square on the board. this addition to the rules of chess doesn't foundationally change chess,
Sure,
right?
sure.
It can still be played. It's just going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Foundationally, the core of chess is still the same. But let's say I started saying, I don't like chess very much. You know what? I don't like how the bishop moves. I'm cutting that out of the game. Oh, I don't like how the queen moves. I'm cutting that out of the game. I don't like how the rook moves. I'm cutting it out of the game. And I keep cutting and cutting and cutting away at the foundation of chess, changing the rules, removing pieces, all these things. Eventually, chess is going to stop being chess. It's just not going to exist anymore. It's going to become something else. And because the flower game is so foundational to the existence of the universe, to the dynamic between the Gardener and the Winnower, to remove and change these rules would be catastrophic. It would almost arguably bring the end to the universe as we know it, because the foundation of the universe is the flower game, which to me screams the idea of the prophecy of extinction. I want you guys to remember what Allison said in Bife's interview. Allison said that the 9 are the rules, and that they are what gives paracausality the capacity to exist in the first place.
They're the foundation.
And since we know that the light and the dark, the Gardener and the Winnower, became manifest in the game as the Traveler and the Veil, these new rules were manifested in the universe in physical, real ways, so too would the old rules of the game become manifest and physical and real in the universe.
So with us binding the 9, aren't we kind of fucking up the rules? Like if that's what we're doing, we're going, our journey, our quest is now to bind the 9. Are we in fact fucking with the foundations of the flower games? Dude, honestly, this theory is really holding up. Right now, the Winnower after the final shape sent us a message pretty much, and it was along the lines of, I'm winning. You guys are always going to do essentially what I want you to do, because the process of just taking life, killing, destroying, it's inevitable. And you're going to just always be doing my bidding, right? And we thought to ourselves at the time, how do you even beat the Winnower if everything you're doing is playing into the game? But if we're binding the 9, and that is the foundational, that is the foundation to the flower game, well, we're fucking the game up. We're fucking the game up. We're essentially showing up to the chessboard and flipping it upside down. My other question is like, in this case, is the Winnower bad? Is the Gardener good? Or are they both just extreme beings trying to have a good game? I honestly am not completely on board with the Gardener being good. Not after like listening to this theory. I don't know. I think honestly, if we ever like the next saga could be taking out both the Gardener and the Winnower. Why did you ever think they were good or bad? Well, I mean, you know, association is the Gardener with the Traveler and it gives life, yada, yada. You know where I'm coming from? So the association was good, and you know, at least that was what we were led to believe. Oh man, it really is just like, essentially they were playing a game and the game became too soft, because obviously the Vex was the winning card. The winning card every single time. And so the Gardener wanted to add a level of complexity to it, a level of randomness that essentially seemed to always keep the game going. I respect it. I do respect it. Who cares about winning? Winning, sure, feels good in the moment, but playing forever, that's the best. You know what I'm saying? So I do resonate with the Gardener on that shit.
And so my idea is, because of this similarity, this dynamic, where the 9 are the rule through which paracausality is subjected to, in the same way that the rules of the light and the dark are subjected to the rules of the flower game. And then if you cut away at the rules of the flower game, you would be cutting away at the universe itself, since the universe is foundationally based on the flower game. So too, if you cut away the 9, you bring us towards the prophecy of extinction. It was the death of 3 that started this whole prophecy in the first place. But there's a problem. Dankke. It's in the name. There's 9 fourth-dimensional beings linked to the 9 celestial bodies in our solar system. But there's only 4 rules of the flower game. The math doesn't add up. How does this correlate? There's something missing here. And I have an answer for you. And to be honest, if I want to be fair, it is the weakest part of this theory. I've had this section called What a Flower Knows that's been empty on the whiteboard the entire video. And I'm sure some of you guys were wondering what its purpose was this entire time, but now I'm finally giving you guys some answers. This is my, although a bit of a stretch, attempt to answer the dilemma with this theory of there being 9 members of the 9, but only 4 original rules to the flower game. How would it be possible for the 9 to be the manifestations of the original rules of the flower game if there's only 4 original rules? It just doesn't.
Well, would it be a rule per planet? I feel like it doesn't have to be, right? Is that what Dankke's saying right now?
Doesn't add up. What I have here listed on the whiteboard is a list of what I would call loose rules of the flower game that are sourced from the final chapter of the In Spiral lore book titled Winnowing. So Winnowing is another message we received from the Winnower, and this lore entry is a little bit of a clarification that the Winnower is giving to us in regards to the functions of what was going on in the Garden Before Time. It gave us a little bit more detail in regards to how the flower game worked, right? What was the mechanisms behind the flower game? And how did the game of possibilities work, right? What was the collaborative effort between the Gardener and the Winnower within the game of possibilities? And so what the In Spiral lore book establishes is at the top of the lore entry, it lists 5 things that a flower knows. And these 5 things are as follows. A flower knows the direction of the sun, the presence of the rain, the tangle of its roots, the distress of another plant, and whether it's been pruned, transplanted, or crushed by the hands of a gardener. In the context of the In Spiral lore book, it's not talking about like the gardener, but a gardener who just tends to the garden. It's not like capital G gardener, if you know what I mean. And the reason why I'm calling this list of things a flower knows as these like loose rules of the game is because it's directly rooted in a conversation about the flower game from the Winnower. And the Winnower makes it extremely clear within the text, right, of the Winnowing lore tab that although the conversation we're having is baked in metaphor and allegory, the meaning behind these terms is baked in truth. When he's trying to clarify how the flower game actually works, and he presents to us these 5 truths about what a flower feels, what a flower knows within the game, it feels like another element of truth, of order within the game itself. When I look at this on the board, right, obviously we've gone up to 9, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When I look at the division of these 2 ideas of like, here's the hard cut, inmalleable, set in stone rules of the flower game, and here's like the more subjective personal aspects of how do the flowers operate in the game itself. What are the rules of the flowers? You know what I mean? Is it really reminds me of the dynamic of the outer 9 and the inner 9, right? Where the way that life in soul interacts with the 9 is it's divided in these 2 groups, right? Where the inner 9 are these much more personal, hospitable, caring members of the 9 who view our relationship as symbiotic, where, if it is true that the 9 are the manifestations of the rules of the flower game in the real universe, then it's a beneficial relationship to keep, both parties alive, because the flower game needs kind of 2 things to operate, right? In order for the flower game to work, it needs flowers. It needs life to function. And at the same time, in order for life to exist, the flower game and the rules of the flower game also need to exist. While the outer 9 are this much more rigid and cold and cruel group of 9, where they're almost like tired of their purpose, right? It almost feels like an opposite story of the Witness, where the Witness was the civilization that really sought purpose, and it didn't have any purpose until it learned of its origins as the first knife from the garden before time. And once it knew what it was created for, to trim and shape the garden, it sought that purpose wholeheartedly, fully, to the point where it merged itself into a single collective being. But the outer 9 almost want to reject their original purpose. They are the manifestation of the original rules of the flower game. They're the more rigid aspect of these rules, set in stone, immalleable. They just are. They have this purpose intrinsic to them, and they don't want to be the rules anymore. They want to ascend, like in the case of 6. They don't want to be reliant on life. They don't want to be reliant on the flowers anymore. The inner 9 recognize that they need the flowers, and so they work with us. They work with the patterns of the flower game. Well, the outer 9 want to free themselves from us, from the tyranny of the flowers, you could say. But yeah, guys, that's...
So in other words, Saturn's a bitch, because he doesn't like the meta anymore. And yeah, he's trying to break the rules. Dude, no lie. This is such an interesting take. Like, this is a very interesting, and lo and behold, it ends up being 9 here. But yeah, I mean, when you think about how the outer 9 operates and their mentality versus how the inner 9 operates, it do be like that. It do be like that. Where the fuck is Pluto in all this? Who? Pluto! Pluto ain't a fucking planet? Well, but hold up. People be changing the rules up. Pluto is not a moon. It's just a dwarf planet. Oh, so dwarf planets, they don't count? Really? You guys are assholes. No. You guys are fucking assholes. Pluto, in my eyes, I put it up there as one of the planets. I think they count.
It's the theory that the 9 are the original rules of the flower game, made manifest in the universe of destiny, why they are the rules, as Allison calls them in Bife's interview. I think it makes sense overall, although I do think there's probably a couple holes in the theory. I do think the final bit of trying to balance, the numbers here with the more loose, malleable rules and the more hard set in stone rules, it feels a little bit more like a stretch, but I still think it's a pretty cool theory, and I really hope it made sense. It's a lot more of a complicated theory than I've presented here throughout my previous 4 videos, but I hope you guys enjoyed the theory. If you did, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe button down below. But that's all for me, guys, and peace out.
Guys, go check out Dankke, man. I am really enjoying his presentations and his outlook on lore, and even like stuff that I felt like I kind of knew. It's so nice to just kind of go back and recap old lore entries. What this really means is we're about to deal a lethal blow in some way over this next year and a half to the Winnower, and in potentially even the Garderner, because we are upsetting the rules of the game. With us doing the binding of the 9, we are upsetting the rules of the game. I have no idea what this means. I think the logical thought on us going, if we ever were to approach a sequel for Destiny, would be what? Everyone's saying we're going to go to a new solar system. I don't even know if that's where we're going to go, fellas. Because when you do something like this, it's not like you're just going to go to a new planet. I'm not saying we won't go to Torbado or Fundament or whatever, but we may just go to an entirely new realm. And the other question is, it's not just where we're going, when. Because we may end up in a situation here where we travel through time, forwards or backwards. And then the other side of things is like, you could talk like, the multiverse theories. What if there's a version of us out there that's bad, like straight up bad? Like, what if there's a version of the weapon out there that's not a good guy, is a dredgen, and is bad? You know where I'm coming from? I'm just saying, you want to talk about some crazy stuff? Imagine fighting yourself. And the other side of things is, what if we find ourselves in the garden, in the actual garden. You know what I mean? Which I guess we were already in the garden, but like imagine going to the garden before the Tree of Silver Wings was chopped down, when the flower game was first taking place. It'd be pretty dope. I would just f myself. That's nice, man. That's the kind of self-love more people need. You know what I mean? I'm not really my type, but I appreciate it.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.